Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem, B'Shem Eigen Shir, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Smith Shlita on Dinek Tevilas Koich Hashmal. Tevilas Keilim for Keurig, urn, water cooler, etc. Tazgate Sliss is sponsoring a shir. Call Eigen Shir at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
A while ago, someone asked me about, he bought a Keurig machine and he wanted to know about the tevila. So I realized that he did me a big chesed because it started me on the journey of this beautiful sugya of the Keurig machine, which is a new metzias, and we'll soon explain the metzias of this machine. But the truth is, even if you don't use this particular coffee maker, this Keurig, but it really touches upon the yesodis that we need for an urn, a microwave, a toaster oven, and of course the newest shaila is the water cooler that people have in homes, and shuls have it. It has a shaila as far as Tevilas Keilim, but more importantly, it touches upon the basic yesodis of hilchos Tevilas Keilim, and we'll soon explain exactly what the Keurig machine is. But just a little of a background. If you notice that the common denominator of today's sugya is there a chiyuv Tevilas Keilim by a electrical appliance, an urn, a water cooler, a Keurig, all worked with electricity. So you're wondering, what's the shaila? Why not? I mean, if it's a keli, it's a keli. If it's made out of metal, it's a keli. What's the difference if it works with electricity? So here, I'll tell you a suggestion and tell me what you think. The Shev Yakov, who was the Rav in Frankfurt am Main over 300 years ago, was asked the following question. It seems that there was a common minhag. He says, the Choshev people did this. They had a big yoira, a big keli, a metal keli, nechaishes actually, a kedera chadasha, a big pot they made of nechaishes, which is vadei chayiv and tevila, and they didn't toivel it. And I trust them, they're doing the right thing. How can you understand that? So his initial response is, what do you mean? You don't toivel a metal keli, a copper keli? How could that be? But then I realized the following, that the reason why we toivel Keilim, the Yushalmi says in the Taz, in the beginning of our Sim, and Kuf Chav quotes it, is Kedei sheyetzi mitumasi shel akom lekedushas Yisrael. The tevila is because a goyish keli has a certain tumah, and you want to get rid of it and instead replace it with the kedushas Yisrael, and especially by food, it has to be b'kedusha. So that's why you have to toivel it. So reasons the Shev Yakov, since the problem is tumah, we know one of the basic rules in hilchos tumah is a keli is mekabel tumah. When it's mechubel karka, it's not mekabel tumah. So this yoira was actually attached to the ground. It was made as an independent keli, that's true, but subsequently it was attached to the ground. So therefore he says, since it's made to attach to the ground, it's considered mechubel karka, and therefore there's no tumah. Reasons the Shev Yakov, if there's no tumah's Keilim. So therefore there's no chiyuv tevila. In other words, what he's saying is that anything that's mechubel karka doesn't have a shem keli, and not only in hilchos tumah has a different din, but in hilchos tevilas Keilim. Now this is wonderful, but you're wondering, what does it have shaychus to a electrical appliance? So here's the chiddush. The Chelkas Yaakov in Yeridea Simon Mem Aleph was asked the question about toiveling an immersion heater. I rather wanted to bring it, but I forgot, so I think we could all know what it is. Basically, an immersion heater is a plug, and it has a coil at the end, and it's very convenient when you're traveling. You could boil water with it. You put it into a cup of cold water, plug it in, and it boils the water. So basically, even if you never saw it, it's a plug, simple plug, with a piece of metal, probably 2 inches metal that's with a coil. So they asked him if you have to toivel that. So he says that Lamaisa, this question might be similar to the Shev Yakov. Why? He says because Lamaisa, as it is, it doesn't have any function as a keli. An immersion heater is basically useless. When does it become functional as a water heater? When you plug it into the wall. You connect it with electricity. So electricity feeds, and it heats the coil, and the coil heats the water. So he says, Oy bazoi, we could use the Shev Yaakov's Yisoid and consider this mechubal karka. Mechubal karka is potter from tevila. He asks, it's only mechubal when you use it. Oich me'ah mechubal. So the real teretz, which he says later himself, is adrabah. If you have a regular keli that has a function and it's electrical, we'll talk about that soon. But this only works when it's plugged in. The only Shem Keli is when it's plugged in. When you sit it and you have it in your pocket, it has no use. In other words, if you have an urn, so even if it's not working, you could put water in it, cold water, but this is functionless. So his Yisoid is anything that works with electricity and is plugged into the wall, makes it functional, is mechubal karka and potter from tevila. He's not the only one that says this. The Sherm Tzanim halacha, we've got a Rav in Flatbush, we've met for many years. In Lamazai and Zayin, he has the same analogy. He says an electrical appliance is like the Shev Yaakov, and he adds, as a proof, the Chazon Ish's famous Yisoid, that when you plug in something into an outlet on Shabbos, that's the Issa Boina. So he reasons if it's Boina on Shabbos, it's considered Mechubal Karka. The third pasuk that says this comparison, the base Avi, I believe, got to live not far from here, for many years, a pasuk here in Borough Park, in Chelik Aleph, Kuf Yudal, in the Tshuva Sefer Beis Avi, the exact same Yisoid. So you have three Gedolia Paiskim that feel any electric appliance that only works with electricity is Mechubal Karka and is Pata from Tevilas Keilim. However, we could say Ibo Yisei Mekra, Ibo Yisei Mesvar. First of all, the fact that since they started using electricity, there are hundreds of shilas written, literally, about toiveling this keli and that keli, and no one ever considered saying that it's mechubal karka and pata. I'm talking about from the earliest paiskim in the beginning of the 20th century, when they started using electricity, more or less. No one says this Yisoid. No. But lamaisa, another problem is the whole het is based on the Shev Yaakov's assertion that if the mechubal karka is pata from tevila. The Chassam Sofer, and this is printed in the Friedman Shulchan Aruch in Yeridea, when they on Sif Hey of the Chassam Sofer's notes, he says, "Ani tama v'heichan ra." The kach, where did the Shev Yaakov see that you compare Tevilas Keilim to Tumah? Even when we said the Yishalmi says you toivel a Keilim because it's Tumas Akum, it doesn't mean Hilchas Tumah v'Tahara, and he proves it. There's a difference in the chiyuv of Tefillah, how much water is needed. So he says, Ein lahakol klal, and say when something's mechubal karka, it's part of Tevilas Keilim. In other words, the word tum is used by the Yishalmi, that's true, but it doesn't mean it's governed by Hilchas Tumah v'Tahara. The Chachmas Adam in Ayin Gimel Yud Gimel, and we'll use this soon from a different angle, he talks about a big yoira that was attached to the ground, and he goes, you have to toivel it. His eitzah is, if someone breaks it, and now it's a keli shover, and a yid repairs it, it's like Keli Shetikan Yisrael, which is like Keli She'asa Yisrael. But he doesn't even contemplate saying it's mutter because it's a Chumachobel Karka. And the third is the Maria Asad, the Talmud of Chassam Sofer, Yodea, Simon Kuf Tezayim, also says, Lo Yedana, I don't hear a Shaila, it's, even if it's Mechobel Karka, if it's a functional Keli, it's Chayiv and Tefillah. Now, Lamaisa, Chelkas Yaakov himself was aware of this, and he said, I did see the Maria Asad holds that there's no heta of mechubal karka, but the minhag is not like the Maria Asad. Okay, he says, but the main taina is iboyisei mesvar. When you look at a immersion heater, or you look at an urn, or a Keurig machine, do you see it mechubal karka? Maybe it's a lumdis because the only way it works is if it's plugged into the wall. But do you see a portable urn or a immersion heater? Is it logical to say that this is considered mechubal karka? Even according to Shev Yaakov, is it really mechubal karka? The Shev Yaakov's case is easy to understand. It's anchored to the ground, attached to the ground. We'll soon talk about an urn that's attached to the wall. Many shuls have it, or it's attached to the countertop. That's really mechubal karka. But a lumdus, because it's plugged in, it becomes mechubal karka. Who says? The Shevet Alevi in Chelik Beis and Zayim, he writes a very sharp lashon, I could even say. He says, but don't even think about this svara. It makes no sense. The Debetzina Rav in Chelik Dalas and Kuf, he doesn't believe anybody said such a svara. He says it doesn't even dignify a rebuttal or response. It doesn't make sense. Because it's plugged into the wall, when you use it, it becomes mechubal karka. It might be dependent on electricity, that does, yeah. And that's why Lamaisa, the Paiskim very strongly reject this svara. It's a lumdus, but it's not a reality. You can't say an urn that's plugged in is considered mechubal karka unless it really is. Now the Chelkas Yakov and a later tshuva, 2 tshuvas later in Yeridei Siman Mem Gimel, he says, people say, but it's not really mechubal. I have a raya. There's a Tveres Yisrael on Mishnayis in Keilim, and he says the following, that when you have a situation of a door, for example, a door of a house, and it's very shvacha connection, it moves a lot, and even you put it in, it's not really so sturdy, but once you put it into the wall, on Shabbos, that's considered boina. So, Zok the Chelkas Yaakov, you see, even if it's not such a permanent connection, it's considered boina. If it's considered boina, it's considered mechubal karka. But the truth is, the analogy is strained, because I understand, on boina is totally in what it looks like part of the house. In Taka Rafeld in a seif on Hilchos Tevilas Keilim, he says, take a step further. He said, let's say you have a drop ceiling. So there are pieces of the drop ceiling, you put it in, it looks very nice, it's very decorative. Putting a drop ceiling plank in on Shabbos is boina. You know why? Because it's part of the binyan. Now, is it attached? Is it very secure? No. But it's part of the binyan. But you can tell me that a electric appliance, because you plug it in, is part of the binyan? A door, I understand. His example of a drop ceiling. But to say a appliance that you plug it in and plug it out when you finish, that's considered mechubal karka? It's not logical. Also, someone asked me, God, he says it also. He asked it also. He said, are you going to ask me many appliances work with a battery operated? No, does that mechubal karka? That he says, you go bust the roif tashmishay. Most Keilim are used with electricity. But Lamaisa, he himself is moida, that the real het is only said by an immersion heater. Because without it being plugged in, it is totally functionless. An urn, you could fill it up with water and use it with a spout to take out cold water. I know Rabbi in Yeshiva that he washes the Talmidim's hands, the young children, from an urn. He fills it up with cold water, he puts the spout, the water comes out, close it, koyach gavra. But it's a functional keli without electricity. Then you could say maybe it's mechubal karka. Then you could say maybe it's not. But the immersion heater, its only function is when it's plugged in. So this is interesting that Lamaisa, the Paiskim did not seem to accept this heta of mechubal karka by electricity. Now someone said a specific svara regarding a Keurig. Now let me explain very briefly what a Keurig is. The Keurig machine is almost all plastic. The frame of it is a strong plastic, but a plastic. The only question of Tevilas Keilim basically is in this, what's called the heating canister. Now to make a long story short, there's a sort of a tank, if you call it like that, but there's a receptacle, you have water in it. That's plastic generally. And that you put water in it, and when you put the machine on, the water is pumped from this reservoir, very small amount, into a heating canister, metal, that has a coil in it. It's around, the diameter is 3 inches, and the height about between 4 and 6 inches. Nice size keli, metal, and that cooks the water rapidly. Usually it has water ready for the next work use, but basically this canister is the only metal part of the entire Keurig machine, except for the pins we'll soon see. Now, here's the point. Since the roiv rub of the keli is plastic, one of the Heintige Paiskim says, Oy bazoi, you go bust the roiv, and it's part of Tevilas Keilim, like a regular plastic keli that the minhag not to toivel it. Now this is a pella, because the entire keli is only, the main part of it is that heating canister. So you can't make a bottle out of the main part. So that's why that svar is hard to understand. What is a little more, maybe a lot more promising, is the following yesod. This heating element, this canister, the heating canister, the metzius is that you can't get to it, you can't see it, and you can't toivel it. In other words, the way it's constructed is it's put in the machine, and you can't get to it. So therefore what? Basically, we find a concept in Hilchos Tumah based on one of the Makaris and Mishnah Mikvois, Perek Yud, Mishnah Hay, the following. If you have a long handle of a wooden handle to a Keilim, to a metal Keilim, a serving spoon with a metal spoon and a wooden handle. So the halacha that we'll soon see in Yeridea, if it's one Keilim, you have to toivel the entire Keilim. Don't say, well, this is wood, this is plastic, I'll just toivel the metal. No. Once it's one Keilim, you toivel the whole Keilim. Zok the Mishnah. Let's say you have a handle that's 2 inches long, but you only need 1 inch. So the Mishnah, really what you could do is toivel the serving spoon, the metal, with 1 inch of the wood that you're going to keep, and the rest of you have to toivel it. Why? Since it's oimadli katzet, you're going to cut it off very soon, ignore it. Zok the Mishnah, toivel it as it is, with 1 inch, a little more if you want, and that's it. The kasha all the Rishonim wonder is, when you're going to end up cutting off that extra inch, so you're going to expose a part of the wood that wasn't toiveled, because it was covered by the extra piece of wood. So one of the terutzim, the Mordechai in Masech Shavuos Perek Beis says is, this is what's called Tumah Balua. Right now, that surface that ends up being the top of the handle was Balua. It was totally not seeable, inaccessible. So therefore, the tefillah you made goes on the Balua as well. Now this concept of Balua is brought in Yeridei at the end of Simon Reish Beis. This very shaila, Tumah Balua is included in the tefillah. It's negay in Tevilas Nashim and Yeridei Kuf Tzadiches Sivav, a very common yisoid. You could also refer to as Beis Hastorim, which is inaccessible. The same idea interchangeably. Yeah. So some of the poskim say, Oy bazoi, we have a good reason why a Keurig is not chayiv in tefillah in the first place. Why? The plastic parts, zichar not chayiv. The only thing is that canister, metal canister, that's a Tumah Balua. You can't even get to it. And we'll soon see if you toivel it and leave it in the mikveh indefinitely, it's not going to help. It doesn't get to that area. You need a pump, electric pump, to pump the water into that canister. So therefore there's no chiyuv tefillah. Now this I saw from some of the Heintige Poskim. And I called one of them, I asked him, I said, I don't understand. Tumah Balua, based storm works, because the tefillah on the keli goes on the blue as well. But here, you're saying a chiddush, that there's no chiyuv tefillah, man yema. So he said, never thought of it. I think it's the pashta chiluk. I'm not saying I'm right, but you have to have a raya. The Mishnah, the Machaba, Hilchos Tevilas Nashim, all goes that since you have a tefillah on the bulk of the keli, who adin, there's Beis Hastorm or the blue up. But where do you find that it's a magical idea that it doesn't no chiyuv? Maybe it's included in the existing tefillah. So that's why this heta, I think, is a big tzarech. What is probably a little more of a heta is the following metzias. Now again, this is a metzias, I could explain it, but I don't want to waste the time. The metzias is on a regular electric appliance. People used to be very scared to toivel it. If you toivel it, it's going to break. Now that's not true. The only reason why it might break is, and I'm not going to explain it because you're not going to follow anyhow, is because in any electric appliance, there is sometimes an excess of electricity, which causes it to either to short circuit or to fry, like the way they say it. But they have, the mechanism keeps electricity sort of rooted in a different way. So it doesn't go all to one area and doesn't overload. When you have water, water is a conductor, and water transmits all the water to the other side, and the electricity to the other side, and that makes it short circuit and it breaks instantly. So it's not that it breaks, but if you use it when it's wet, then it breaks. It short circuits and it burns out. But if you dry it and you leave it to dry, then it's absolutely no problem. Now we've been saying this for years, and no one ever told me that it was not true. You could leave it outside, especially on a sunny day. Probably 24 hours later, it's good to go. You shake it out first and leave it in the sun outside. Now some people say 48 hours. Okay, the more the merrier. No problem. But if dries properly, no problem. This is by a regular electric appliance of all types. The newer types of appliances, which Keurig is one of them, have two features that doesn't help drying or won't dry enough. One is a digital display, For some reason, that keeps the water on it, and it will not dry. But more so on a computer chip. A computer chip needs either it needs a long time to dry, or it doesn't dry fully. So b'kitzah, even if you wait a while and you plug it in, typically it does break. So one of the two, but certainly both, makes it impossible to toivel. Now you could toivel it, but that's not a kli suda, it's a kli shavar. So the bracha is levatola, and the whole tevila is the bracha levatola, if you know what I mean, because you're only breaking it. So now we have a new interesting point, and that would be that something that breaks, so you're not going to use it anyhow. So maybe there's no chiyuv tefila, because why break it and not use it? Use it and don't break it. But that doesn't sound convincing, so don't use it, right? But here is something that's unprecedented. To my knowledge, we have nothing like this since Torah was given. This particular Keurig machine, as opposed to anything else, you can't toivel it. Let's say, you know what, I'm willing to toivel it, even if it breaks, it's worth the money. My Zayda gave up for the Shabbos, I'm going to give it to his camp. I'm going to toivel it and break it. Which I'm not sure makes sense. But let's say you want to do it, right? You can't do it. You can't get mikvah water into that heating canister because it's a balua, more than a balua, it's just inaccessible. The only thing is to put it on when it's working, toivel it, and pump it, but that's going to blow a fuse in the biggest way. So you can't physically toivel it. So here is the crux of the issue. If you can't toivel it, so maybe there's no chiyuv tevila. Now the first reaction is, what do you mean? If you can't toivel it, don't buy it and don't use it. Right? You have to toivel a Keilim. So that assumption is that the tevila is a matir. If you have no heta, then you can't use it. But it's very reasonable to say that if you can't toivel it, maybe there's no chiyuv. In other words, let me be more clear. The halacha is both in Yeridea, Siman Kuf Chaf, and in Archaim Shin Chav Gimel. If someone is stuck on Shabbos, he has no keli but one that he forgot to toivel. So he has no keli that wasn't toiveled. So then the halacha is he's allowed to give it to a goy, but matana, there's a whole halacha what to do. But there, lamaisa, it's shaykh tefila. You're an oynis. So I could say, oynis, lav kman David. You didn't do it. You have to find an eitzah. But, or else a person stuck out of town. I just heard the stories out of town. There's no mikveh, no Yiddishkeit to be found. So, napshat, there's no chiyuv tefila. You're an oynis. So deal with the oynis. Here, there's no potential tefila available. So maybe we have to understand that lemaisa there's no chiyuv tefila. So it's not your oynis, there's no chiyuv. Or we'll say, what do you mean? A metal keh is chayiv and tefila. You have to conform to the Torah's halachas. Don't take the Torah and make it custom made for your shilas. So this is the shilah. Now we might have something similar to this, and that is the following. Let's say someone le'aleinu le'lechem is an oinen before the kfur of a relative, and he's potter from mitzvahs. Is very eerie feeling. You eat without a bracha and doesn't bench, but he can't eat tarfas. He's not a goy. None of us. He's potter from mitzvahs, I say, but he's not mutter in isurim. He can't eat shatnez or eat tarfas. So he eats without a bracha. The question is, how can he eat without a bracha? And he's not mechuyev the mitzvah of making a bracha, the mitzvah rabbanan, but the is an issa of eating below bracha, kilumah. So how can he eat without a bracha? The problem is mitzad the gezel. That's an issa. The teretz has to be that the issa is a product of the chiyuv. If he has a chiyuv, me and you have a chiyuv to make a bracha, there's an issa without a bracha. But if there's no chiyuv to make a bracha because he's an oinen, so there's no issa. So the issa is a byproduct of the mitzvah. If there's no mitzvah, there's no issa. Maybe we'll say the issa of Keilim Shaloi Taval, the issa of the Rabbanim of Keilim Shaloi Taval is a product of the mitzvah. No mitzvah, maybe no issa. But we could do much better. A more custom-made raya. And let's say a person, whatever the hechatimsa, he has a business with a guy. He trusts the guy, whatever, and decide to buy an urn, b'shutfis. 50% mine, 50% yours. And I'm not going to make trade. Let's say he's an erlich guy. The question, do you have to toivel that urn? So typically, we'll soon see an urn should be toiveled, let it dry, and use it. But why is this case different? So this is a Ramah in Sif Yud Aleph, based on Issa V'Heta. And Zok the Issa V'Heta, that a Yid and a Goy that have a shutfus in the Keilim, there's no Chiyuv Tefila. Why not? because even if you toivel for Heim Morgan, it's not going to help. the tevila is to take me to Masal Akum, look Dushan to Yisrael. Here, it's still the Goyish Keilim. It's not going to help tevila. As I sagt der Amor, sagt the Beis Meir, if you like that, good for you. But I don't understand that. This on the page. If you can't toivel it, so therefore what? So don't use it. What happened to this Rabbanim? You can't toivel because it's still in Tumah, so don't use it. Sagt the Mincha Shloimeh, Shlomo Zalman Tinyana Samaches Aleph. He said the same Yesod. The Issa is a product of the Chiyuv Tefillah. If there's no way to toivel it because it won't help, halt the Ramah and the Issa Beheta, that you can't. There's no Chiyuv Tefillah. No Chiyuv Tefillah, there's no Issa. So this is l'choira, the question that we have to deal with. Now let me make it a little more geschmack. Let's say a person b'mezid chas v'shalom took a pot and cooked the cholent. No heta whatsoever. It wasn't getoivel. There are most of the favors that even though he did an issa, the food is not treif. So what do we see? When it's not getoivel, as bad as it is, it's not treif. So let's take that a step further. I have a Keilim, a shutvis with a guy. Or, the new example, I have a Keurig machine. I can't toivel it. I can break it, but I can't toivel it. So maybe, since it's not also to eat it, even if I would have not toiveled it, the only problem is my chiyuv tefila. I have no chiyuv tefila. So this is again the question. It's not oinus. Oinus lav command of. You didn't do it. Maybe the heta is there's no chiyuv tefila. So lemaisa, the Forsheimer heard from Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, who said that taka this is a good svara to be matter. There is no chiyuv tefila if you can't do it. Rav Forst in his sefer on kashrus takes a very strong stance, and the way he puts it in his eloquent way, he says that the Torah is not required to adapt to our lifestyle. We have to adapt to the Torah, and if you can't toivel it, don't buy it and don't use it. But these are the two tzadim that Lamaisa makes the Keurig, in a certain sense, more than any other keli that maybe there's no chiyuv tefila because you can't do it. So Lamaisa, this is something that the Paiskim discuss at length, but something that's different again than any other situation that we ever had. So it is a good way of thinking that maybe taka it will be put. Now let's say someone say, you know what, I want to do a little better. I don't want to use a keli that wasn't good. Is there any aids of me to make it a little better of a situation? So Lemaisa, the Mechaben Yarideya, Kuf Chav, Siv Tezayin, also in Archayan Shin Chav Gimel, Siv Zayin, discuss the following case. Someone on Erev Shabbos had only one keli to use, and supposed to toivel, and he forgot. Now it's Shabbos, and he has no keli. What does he do? So the Mechaber says, if nothing else, no other eitzah, give it to a goy b'matana, even though we don't make kinyanim on Shabbos, but this is a tzarech mitzvah, like you do, you give dalat minim, give it to a goy b'matana, and you will borrow it from the goy. Now you're wondering, what does it help giving it to a goy? I'm making it worse. Now it's a goy shekeli. The teretz is that once it becomes the goy's, it's more of a p'tur than a shutef. Madach shutef with the goy is pata. Certainly, a goy is keilim. So this is what the Ramah said. The Shulchan Aruch says in two places that lemaisa the give it to a goy, and you can't make a hocus pocus. There has to be a kinyan. Tell the goy to pick it up, mashicha first, then hagbah. It becomes the goy's, and you borrow it on Shabbos, as I state in the Shulchan Aruch. Now the truth is, as we'll soon see, during the week, if someone's stuck out of town, I just had the shaila, and the mama says there's no mikvah around. He bought one pot and there's nothing around. So during the week you do a better eitz. We'll soon see why it's better, but you buy a pot, and sell it to a guy, and then borrow it. Now why is buying and selling better than borrowing? Matana, it's less of an aroma. Now if this fellow, he made a mistake, he went into one of these, again, is in a place there's no Yiddishkeit benimtza, and he bought a pot, and then he's told the owner, I'd like to sell it back to you. And the fellow got very, very suspicious. He goes, I'm going to call the police if you don't get out of here. You're buying it back? What do you want from me? He doesn't know about Yiddish, but Mechiras Chametz works, So you do what you have to do with a guy that's going to go along with you. But once you do it real, and the guy is kind of the Keilim, whether you sold it to him or matana, then you're allowed to use it. Now, how does this work? Because again, it's not considered a Yiddish Keilim. You'll say it's harama. Chas v'shalom. I mean, it is harama, but we rely on harama l'gabi mechiras chametz. As long as it's done a legal deal, halachic deal, it's okay. Now, so bazoi, if you don't want to rely on the heta that there's no chiyuv, you can make it more of a heta and give it to a guy. And l'mashal, if a person has a Keurig machine and he has it at home or office, so he takes a guy, maybe the cleaning lady, if she understands English, of course, it has to be real. Or the guy is the janitor in the office, and you sell it to him. Of course, you sell it to him, it has to be with the kinyan, mammon, and other kinyanim. Again, because more is not kindness in some situations, but you make a legal kinyan, and then you're borrowing it from him. Now, this is something that's sanctioned by the Shulchan Aruch. Now, you're going to ask me again, but I'm using it without tevila. But it's not like the case of the Keurig machine, because the Keurig machine is a Keilim Shel Yisrael that you can't toivel. This is a Keilim Shel Akum. This is a Gemara. But the problem is the Taz in Yeridea and in Arachayim says the heta is only the fisha, but you can't give it to the guy matana and use it indefinitely, because once he's using it indefinitely and he tells you it's like a goyishim mashkin that you have, you're allowed to use it because it belongs to the guy. But once you see he's not paying back, nishtaka b'Yisrael, it becomes yours. Here, it zicha becomes yours because you're using it for so many months. So his lashon is, it's important that we the lashon, anira the tzarach tevila achar she'ef shalei litvail. You can't just keep it indefinitely. In other words, it's a very impractical heta. The heta of either selling it to a guy or matana to a guy only works indefinitely. And the Mishnah and Shin Chav Gimel, the Aruch HaShulchan, both in Yeridea and Arachayim. What? Not indefinitely. Right. And Mishnah in two in Arachayim, the Aruch HaShulchan in Yeridea and Arachayim all say only for a short time over Shabbos. Ein lecha b'ayel chidushay. So the truth is the Chelkas Yakov, interesting, who was a big matir regarding electric kettle. He says, but if you want to give it to a guy, a matana or mecha only works over Shabbos. That's l'chayr the aleph base. However, and this is interesting, if you look at the lashon of the Taz says you can't use it indefinitely. Tzarech tevila achar she'ef shaloi litval. In other words, if you could toivel it and you just need an eitzah because over Shabbos, so then you shouldn't do it. But the Keurig machine, you can't ever toivel it, so it's not going to help over Shabbos. And B'kiva Eiga, in the beginning of our simon on the Shachsiv Kot and Dalid, is kamat as clear as can be that the heta of giving it to a goy b'matana works indefinitely. And a number of other poskim say this as well. The Minchas Yitzchak in Chelik Keisim and Kuf Chav Vav, he was asked about Keilim can't be toivel. He says either sell it to a guy or give it to matana, and he quotes a number of poskim, Dakar Tshuva, Shulchan Gavoya. It works even indefinitely. Now, Lamaisa, you have to realize that the pastors of the Taz not like that. But then again, you can understand a little better because I don't want to be kind of this. Nishtakish, you have a mashkin of the guy, he didn't pay you, right? So, but he gave you a mashkin. So you could say, if he's not going to pay me, I'm not going to go for this, I'm going to keep it. You want to keep it. I understand. Here, you don't want to keep it. You want to get rid of this. This is a kesh leitava. So, even though some hold that it doesn't work more than a Shabbos, but don't forget, we have other stuff we make a b'chlal. So those that would like to use the Keurig and they're not so excited about using a new heta that never existed, that there's no chiyah because he can't do it, what they do typically is they get a guy that understands English first of all. Can't get a guy that doesn't talk English and shakes his head solemnly. It just doesn't make sense. He understands what's going on. He's buying it. He's loaning it to you indefinitely. I know many officers do that. They talk to a guy, was versteht das auch. You want to give him the money to buy it off you, whatever, make it workable, but there has to be a halachic and a legal kinyan. This would supplement, if you want, the previous heta that some say is no chiyuv at all. So definitely this adds to the heta also. Now, Lamaisa, as I told you earlier, that the Shulchan Aruch in both places you give a matana to the guy, and I wondered why not do it a little more official and sell it to the guy and borrow it. So l'chayra mechira sounds more like a real deal than just a matana. You give punkta to a guy, you give matana. In fact, some wonder why is no sichanim. Teretz is il toivas yid is all sichanim. But l'maisa mecha sounds to be a little more, more real. And the avada, it's true. A mecha is much more real. But on Shabbos, you can't make a mecha. In both places, Yarden and Archaim talk about Shabbos. So you can't make a mecha. Come, you can make a matana. But avada, a mecher is a better option. So l'maisa, the heta of either mecha or matana is not perfect. The Taz l'chari doesn't agree. But it's good enough for our cases as well. Now, but one thing I want to mention, this heta only is applicable when there's no other eitzim. And I'll tell you what I mean. The Shevet HaLevi, Chelik Tes, Siman Kuf Samach Zayin, was asked from a big baker. I can't imagine the Metzias. He had 25,000 pans made out of stainless steel. Now, it's not disposable. 25,000 stainless steel pans. I guess they use it for their baking. And they said they can't toivel it, because if you toivel it, it gets rusty. So he wanted to sell it to one of the workers, Goyishi workers, and not toivel it. So he writes back, the heta is only when there's no eitzah, and I'm suspicious that you're doing it because you don't want to toivel 25,000 bekelach. But the truth is, stainless steel doesn't get rusty, right? So I couldn't figure that out. But anyhow, whatever. He says, I said the heta is not a good heta, and especially you're doing it because you're too lazy to toivel it. So you can't abuse the heta. You can't give the guy everything in your house, sell him your house with all the dishes, don't toivel it. It has to be within reason. Now there is a different eitzah, and believe it or not, there are people that do this eitzah for a nominal fee. And basically the Chachmas Adam that I mentioned earlier, Ayin Gimel Yud Gimel, discusses a big yoira. He's not like the heta of Mechubar. His eitzah was, if you make a break in the pot, and it makes the pot functionless, broken, and the Yid repairs it, it becomes Keilim She'asi Yisrael. Keilim She'tikin Yisrael, a Yesh Me'ayin, is like Keilim She'asi Yisrael. So, the later Paiskim understood, B'schei Tshuvas Hivkat Aleph, the Minchas Yitzchak Chelik Tes, Siman Pei Gimel, brings this out very well, that if you have any Keilim, which is not broken, but you break it enough that it's broken, and you need an uman to repair it. In other words, you can't cut the wire and splice it because anybody does that. It has to be broken that only a professional could repair it. He could break it and get out of the trouble. Then it's a Keilim She'asi Yisrael. Now this is a good eitzah, but you have to get someone that knows what he's doing. So when they started using the Keurig machine, there was someone that figured it out and broke it and repaired it. So I think he charged $40. So you do what you want. But the Evan Yisrael, Shlomo Fisher was a very practical person, in Chelik Tes Ayin Beis, he says, a Keilim you can't toivel, of course you could use the Chachmas Adam's eitzah, but make sure that the breaking doesn't cost more than the Keilim. Otherwise, it's a certain sense, it's just a little, unusual. Now, people feel, why not? I need the Keurig, I'll do it. So I know there are people in different neighborhoods that do this service, but it has to be in a way that it's broken, that no one but an uman could repair it. Another point that I wanted to mention is the Paiskim discuss the question of having this uman do it. It has to be against someone that's really taking his job seriously. See, taking apart an item does not mean it's broken. Some people have a good chush, they remember where things came from. This, and I can explain how you do it, but it's not a game. They literally break it. You have to be a mumcha to know how it works, and of course repairs it properly. Now, Lamaisa, there is a point I want to mention, and I'm getting different information, so probably it's a different metzias. There's another part of the Keurig machine that's l'chayra metal. Now the way it works is you put a K-cup into the Keurig machine. On the top part, you close it tight onto the K-cup, but there's a pin supposed to be a metal pin on the top, and when you close it, it makes a hole in the Keurig cup. There's also a metal pin on the bottom, so when you put the K-cup in it makes a hole in the bottom. So there's a pin on the top, pin on the bottom, and you close it, the two pins make holes top and bottom. Now why are you making holes? Very simple. Because the K-cup has the coffee grind, the water, the very hot water drips in, or pours in, it brews it, and when it's ready, it drips through that pinhole into your cup. So basically you're just creating a old-fashioned brewing coffee like the percolators from 50, 60 years ago. But Lamaisa, the pins seem to be metal. So had it been just that the pin makes a hole, we could say it's like a can opener. It's not chayiv and tevila. But Lamaisa is more than that. The pin is sort of like a spout that allows the water to go through into the K-cup. The bottom pin allows the percolated coffee, brewed coffee, to drip into the cup. So I looked at one, I looked at another one, and one person swore to me that it's a plastic. It's very sharp. Plastic, so plastic is not chayiv and tevila. And also someone else told me that it's not that it drips through it. It's not like a spout. But since there's a hole there, it goes through it. So the two pins have to be reconsidered. If they're metal and it's a spout, then you have to toivel it. Now, the Lamaisa don't break it, but they say if you could cajole it, if you do it carefully, you could disconnect the metal piece, toivel it, and put it back. Or if you want to toivel it, just immersing that, but that's very hard to do, as you know. But you need a little more clarification in the Metzias. The truth is, it's not unreasonable. There are different makes and models. But if it's a metal pin, just makes a hole, forget about it. That's a taka can opener. But if it's a metal pin that's a spout, then the that would be like a spout that should be chayiv and tevila. As far as other appliances, so the immersion heater is very interesting. The immersion heater is a very common thing. It's very practical if you travel. But the Maisa, the Paiskim seem to agree that this doesn't need chayiv tevila with a bracha. Why? Besides the Chalkas Yaakov Svar that it's considered mechubal l'karka, but the Pshem Zalman has a loshim that this is not a keli, it's a maisa gecheles. It's like a piece of iron that you heated to cook water. Or better yet, the Psel HaChochma, his loshon is, it's a kli gomer, but it's a maisa eitziv ugecholim ba'alma, and that there's no chiyuv tefillah. In other words, as opposed to an urn, a crock pot, a toaster, it's a keli. This is, you're heating a metal to cook water, but not a keli. So he calls it a maisa gecheles. So that's why the Paiskim seem to agree on a toast, on this immersion heater. The minhag is not like the Chalkas Yaakov, toiveled bavadai b'loi bracha. Let it dry, and guaranteed nothing will happen. An electric kettle, fancy name, but basically it's a plastic kettle that they sell. Either has one piece or two pieces. You plug it into the wall, and you put the button down. Now, how does that work? It's a very simple immersion heater coil. It's attached to the outer frame, the urn itself, or the kettle itself. So this is much more v'chiyav tefillah, because although it's all plastic, but the heating element is metal. It's attached to the plastic. It's one keli. One keli, the chayr should be toiveled. If you want to make a bracha, it's a little bit chiddush, because the ma'isa plays nachayiv, but definitely toivel it b'loi bracha. This is as far as that Metzias. Be careful to wait until it dries sufficiently, and there's really no problem. A regular urn is vadai chayiv in tefillah. Now, what I mean regular urn means an old-fashioned urn that has no computer chip or a digital display. They're starting to make them more and more with computer chips. That's back to our problem. You can't toivel it. That's same like a Keurig machine. But basically, a urn, there are two parts, which is really one. The Machab, the Shulchan Aruch and Kuf Chav says, if you have a metal handle and a wooden handle and a metal keli, you have to have the whole keli. Rav Moshe, in a big chiddush in Yardei Aleph Nun Zayin, he wants to say that if it's two separate kelim that are attached together, but the heating element is separate, you don't have to toivel the heating element. Just immerse, of course you have to make sure water gets in, you immerse the actual urn until it toivels all of the urn metal keli, and you don't have to toivel the electrical part on the bottom. Now the Minchas Yitzchak, Chelik Beis, Simon Ayin Beis, and many others take exception. The mice it's made into one, but whatever the case is, an urn has to be toiveled, even though it's electrical, we don't go with that cooler, but toivel it, wait, dry it well, and then you can reuse it. There will definitely not be any problems. Now, what I did see, and I want to mention what I saw, do you have to make a bracha on an urn? An urn is a metal keli, it's a receptacle, independent of the electricity. Do you have to make a bracha? So I would say, what's the shayla? Now, the Ma'isa, the Chalkas Yakov, Usiyata, the Shem Tanulach, and the Beis Avi all say there's no chiyuv tefila. The chiddush to me was in the very reliable Sefer Mishmeres Habayis, written by Moshe Matkakab, Hilchos Tevilas Keilim, Amud Mem Daled. He brings Eid and Amarim that Rabbi Yashiv, B'Seif Yamav, agreed with, in theory, to the Chalkas Yaakov, to the extent that you never make a bracha on any electrical appliance because it is enough of a svara mechubal karka. We toivel it, but below bracha. Chaim Kanievsky seems to say the same thing also, but the mainstream poskim all say that you toivel a keli with a bracha, no difference in electricity. So here's where we see an interesting point. Could be electric appliances is always below bracha, in deference to the Yeshita of Chalkas Yaakov that it's mechubal karka. Now, Lamaisa, the urn, if it has a computer chip, is in a certain sense similar to the Keurig. I mean, it's not exactly, because you could toivel it. So again, the eights would be either to break it or have someone give it to a guy, sell it to a guy, whatever it is. Now, a toaster, old-fashioned toaster, that popped up, the bread popped up, that l'chayra is one piece, and even Moshe said is chayiv and tevila. But there's another chiddush where Moshe Chel Gimel Siman Chav Dalet, where Moshe said that the soil tevilas keli is, it's machshir the oichel. It has to make a significant change in the food. What's called a tikkun kal, and that's really a different share, but a tikkun kal doesn't need tefila. Mashal, they have a certain tray that you put the challah comes out of the oven, you put the challah onto the tray. Why? I'm not sure why, but that's the minhag. But that's not a kli oichel. You put a challah onto the tray, it makes a kli oichel. But Rav Moshe said a toaster is also not a kli oichel, because bread is bread. You need toast. What's wrong with regular bread? Fresh bread? So he said it's not enough of a change to make it a chiv and tefila. Rav Moshe was a mufka from Olam Hazeh. In fact, Rabbi Elsi once told me that Rav Moshe cooked an egg for breakfast, because Mara says kol shegibeya beya toivemenu, and the water after he finished the egg he used it for his coffee. So obviously he wasn't into Olam Hazeh. So to him, bread is bread. He says, what's wrong? Now, of course, people like toast better, and especially if it's old bread. So I think the minhag then was to toivel a toaster. But lemaisa, in either case, a toaster is more chayiv because it's one piece. It's not even the Rav Moshe's heta by an urn, because here it's one piece. But of course you have to dry it and make sure that it's completely dry, then you could use it. Now a toaster oven, however, is fundamentally different, because that actually makes things. It cooks food. But the mila is that you could take out the rack that touches the food and toivel just the metal rack, and don't have to toivel the entire toaster oven itself. A sandwich maker is much more of a kli oichel in the respect it doesn't just make toast. It makes cheese, whatever you want to make it, it makes more of a different food. Toaster oven should be treated like a regular electric appliance. To the ace ata, they don't have too much mechanism, so there's no computer chip or a digital. Toivel it, let it dry, and wait a while, and then you could use it. The only issue is regarding a sandwich maker, a George Foreman and a Betty Crocker. Both of them are sort of like a portable grill. It has a heating element that could almost grill food. Now, Maisa, these three are all one keli with no computer chip, so you could toivel it, which we have done. The only issue is if you make a bracha or not, because it's not, you don't put the food on a real metal base. It's a Teflon coating. Teflon is a very fine plastic that, of course, doesn't burn, it doesn't stick, so it's very practical. So had the George Foreman, Betty Crocker, or sandwich maker be a metal material, that surface, toivel with a bracha, if you make a bracha on electric appliances. But these particular things have a coating of Teflon. So Teflon is really plastic, and most places can say that Teflon avada should be toiveled because the bulk of it is metal. It's just a coating. It's like, China, that really is cheres, but a glazing of glass. So these things, it's probably better to toivel below bracha, toivel it below bracha. A microwave we discussed once before, but to mention it briefly, if you don't put, the only shayla would be toiveling the turntable, the plate. If it's plastic, no chiyuv tevila. If it's glass, then there would be chiyuv tevila if you put food directly on it. If you're very makbid only putting a plate in between, then you don't have to even toivel, even though it's glass. Today, the big shayla, it's a difficult shayla, is that many homes and certainly many shuls and offices have, and that's called a water cooler. I don't mean a water fountain that they still have in some places. A water cooler basically is, typically you could relate to it. You have these big water bottles, you put it in, and there is a cooling element, and in sometimes a heating element. So the basic structure of the water cooler is plastic, not a problem. But what counts the most, the actual Keilim that cools the water or heats the water is metal. It's a metal canister, a metal heating element. So the question is, does this have to be toivel? So I'm listening to Tevilas in the Chutshani, Chelik Aleph, Amid Reish Chav. He says, what's the shayla? It's a keli, a metal keli that cooks water. You toivel a kettle, so why is this different? Of course, he doesn't go with the heta of the Chalkas Yakov that it's considered mechubam, so why is it not chayiv and tevila? And Lamaisa, what's interesting is two of the Heintige Paiskim were mechavan to somewhat of a cooler in this respect. Rav Moshe's chiddush was, if something is edible as it is, and you make it a slight improvement, that's not a kli oichel. So I think the Welt did not accept that heta regarding a toaster, because a toaster does make a significant change. But here's the chap. They both say, I saw this, Rav Forsheimer says this, and Rav Felder in the Sefer says the same side. Cold water to regular water is not such a change. You have to have it cooled. Okay, I'm not saying you can't, but it's not like, it wasn't machshir the water. And I like to quote the Lashon, Halachas Ketanis, Cheli Beis, Reish Pei Beis. He speaks about drinking on Yom Kippur, but Bekitzur's point is, he says, the reason why you make a bracha on water when you enjoy it is, and I quote his Lashon is, because Hashoy Semayim Litzmo'oi, Hechshivu Hanoam, Hagadoyla, Shunena, Ki'ilu Achal, Kol Madonei Oilam. The most satisfying drink is plain old water. I tell my children this all the time. You have to have drinks that makes you more thirsty. Fresh water is the most delicious thing. So you want to make it a little more delicious, you cool it. But regular water is also drinkable. So they want to say, if you have a water cooler that only has a cooling element, maybe it's no chiyuv tevila, because it's not machshir oichel. But the problem is, many of them have side by side a heating element also. Heating element, avada, is machshir oichel. You might ask, how do I know that? Who told me that? Maybe taka, hot water is like cold water. So this is interesting. Rav Moshe himself, in that shuv, when he talks about a toaster, he says, a toasting bread is not such a change. Now, you're going to ask me, so why, when you have a kumkum, a kettle, you have to toivel it? Water is water, right? So Moshe says, that's narish. A hot cup of water is a whole different drink than a cold cup. And he brings a raya from a Farish Gemara. Because the Gemara says in Masechta Avodah Zarah that you chayiv and tevila in a yoira, a pot, and a pan, and a kumkumus, the Gemara calls it. So Moshe says, why do you have to have a special halacha? You cook cholent, and you cook meat, and you cook water. I understood. You cook a pot, a pan, you toivel it. So you have to have a cooked water? So Moshe, yeah. You might think, since Mayim is royal the way it is, it's not considered tikkun oichel name. A kumkum, a kettle, is chayiv and tevila. So the same Rav Moshe that felt that there's no significant change in toast from bread, and we could say cold to cooler, but hot is about a different metzias. So this is what he wants to say. They both want to say there could be, if there's just a cooling element, it will be pata. If it's both, so mitzad the heating element, avad it's chayiv in tefila. Now Lamaisa, Rafael in that sefer points out another point, that a lot of these water coolers have a storage tank or storage container of metal that keeps the water there. So then, even if you're not mechayiv al the cooler, but it's something like a kli oitza. See, kli oitza that you store, that you keep it in the cabinet, is part of tefila. But if you bring a water pitcher to the table, a glass water pitcher, you have to toivel it. Why? Because even though you're not drinking from it, but it's like a container. So if you have a nice volume of water in this metal keilim, it's chayiv not out the cooling shabai, it's chayiv out the storage shabai. In fact, you put it on and you drink it right there. So it's like taking from a pitcher. So that's why the heter of the even by a cold one is questionable. He said he heard from Rabbi Feinstein, you definitely should toivel a cooler. Now that's easy to say. The question is, how do you supposed to toivel a water cooler? So Lamaisa, again, it's very difficult, maybe even impossible very often. That gives you more of a comfort. There's a famous chiddush, whether he said or not, veisichnish, but they quote to Rabbi Shulei Diskin that let's say you have a pot of food that was cooked and it wasn't getoiveled. The pot was not getoiveled, so the food is kosher. So how can you take out the food from it? I'm using the pot shalei tovel. So he says taking something out of the keilim shalei tovel is not considered a shimish, even though l'chari you're taking it out to eat, but not considered a shimish. So he wants to say here also, even the worst scenario, this water cooler was not toiveled, but you're not cooking in it, you're not putting it on and making a coffee like a Keurig machine. You're taking it out. Taking it out is not hano, and that's mutak with tag to you. Yes, sir.
Shame you should tell like to give a big extra character to Mr. today's share. Have the guys sponsoring your share or to donate money to Ignish Retire to Mechazik the Shiurim, have a Keilig and a Schustenem, call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Chananya ben Akasha Omer. Oftzak is Bochel the Zak is the Shelfi Hibram Tamish Shnam Alaneh Chofetzaman Sidka Yagdol Terviyade.
Amen. Amen.
Okay. Before we jump into the pool, we don't have to see him on the Tevilas Keilim.
Just let's Chaza learn Bez Hashem. First of all, mechubel karka, many hold is potter from tevila because it doesn't have a Shem Keilim. The question is, can we say an appliance that only works with electricity that has to be attached to the wall, is that considered a mechubel karka? Most places can reject that. There are those that are makel, but most places can feel it has to be a real chibur of some sort. Tuma balua does not need tevila because it's included in the tevila. The question is, can we make a heta and say Tum balua doesn't need tevila at all, and that would permit the Keurig machine? But basically, the klal is anything that cannot be toiveled. Some places say if you can't toivel it, don't use it. And others say if you can't toivel it, there's no chiyuv, there's no issa, because again, tevila is not a matir, it's a mitzvah. So when you have something that could be toiveled, avada toivel it and just let it dry. The Keurig has a double problem. You can't toivel the heating canister, and also it gets ruined. So some are making with that alone. Some get a shutvis or with a guy, or they sell it to a guy, or they borrow it from a guy. And l'chayra, that's one thing I do feel comfortable. You could use it indefinitely. That's enough of to be saimachan. If a yid breaks it and repairs it from a yesh me'ayim, that's also a heta. Immersion heater, electric kettle should be toiveled b'lay bracha. An urn, a toaster, and a toaster oven also should be toiveled with a bracha. Behold, that Tevilas Keilim on electricity applies fully. If you chaysh with a chalkas Yakov, toivel b'lay bracha. A microwave is only the tray if it's glass and the food touches directly. A sandwich machine, a George Foreman, a Betty Crocker, toivel b'lay bracha. A water cooler, the best eitzah, agav, would be if you could rent it from a guy, as we said, or give it to a guy as a matana and borrow it indefinitely. The one with cold water is more of a tzat v'mekel. Hot water does need tefillah. And the auto feed that if you have water piping attached to the machine, that's also a heta, that would be mechubal karka. I gotta run to this here.